Welcome to this Measuring Success in Co-Production event. In this presentation session, we'll expand on the information we provided last month about what we're looking for in applications. Other areas of the event are aimed at helping you to network, connect with others with similar interests, and start thinking about your application and how you can develop it further. My name is Vanessa, and for some key dates in the programme. So while co-producing this programme, we wanted it to be a little different in terms of the experience to other funding rounds. We also wanted to support people in connecting to ensure that the funding and projects that come together are collaborative from the start. So the funding element includes 7 to 9 projects that will be allocated between £10,000 to £15,000 and will run over 7 to 8 months from January next year. But it's more than a funding opportunity, as we explained last time, with training, support, and plenty of opportunities for learning, sharing, and contributing to wider learning on how we can define and maybe even model what we mean by successful co-production. In terms of what information to look at, these are the core documents so far, and links are available from the blog that we have on our website, and we'll have a project page up in the next few weeks. In the last session, we went through the funding criteria, the general application information, and the application form and the appendix table. We also did these following the 12th of September session that we held. Today, we'll provide some more detail on how we're thinking about looking at the criteria, and further background is available from the blogs on the Co-Production Collective website. Finally, the key dates left as we work our way through this programme. And important to note that completed work documents or PDF application forms need to be emailed to us by Monday, the 27th of November, and we'll be notifying applicants of the funding allocation decisions on December the 11th. But this is not where the programme ends, and Ruth will talk a little bit more later about the timeline for funded projects. But first, I'm going to hand over to Lynn to tell you more about the value of co-production and how this relates to our review criteria and what we'll be looking for in relation to that.
Hi, my name is Lynn Laidlaw and I'm a member of the Co-Production Collective and part of the group co-producing this project. So I'm going to talk about the value of co-production project and how the findings from the rapid review we did of academic papers on the value of co-production has informed this project on co-producing impact and evaluation. So in the last video I did for the event, introducing the impact and evaluation project, I concentrated on our finding that we need to develop ways to co-produce evaluating the impact of co-production. And this took into account that the impact is as much on the journey as the destination. But in this video, I want to concentrate on some of the other findings from the value project, which we think will be useful for you to consider when you are developing your projects and applications. So we found that there was often no evidence to back up the claims made in academic papers about how they co-produced their research. Also, even when there was evidence about the co-production process, we found that very few projects were co-produced throughout all the steps. So within the review team, we identified different stages at which co-production could support projects. And these include identifying the need for the project, applying for the funding, designing and planning the project, delivering and doing your project, evaluating what you've done, reporting on what you did, and disseminating your project. And notably, only one study had shared responsibility across the co-production team for all the 7 stages that I've just highlighted. And most only had shared responsibility in 1 to 3 stages. So when filling in your applications, we would like you to consider and provide details of how your team will co-produce all aspects of your projects. And you may ask, why does this matter? And in our review, we identified 4 main types of co-produced research reports. The first type was rich co-production, which were co-authored. The second type was rich co-production, but not co-authored. And then there was co-production vision, but not execution. And then other patient and public involvement research approaches. And we found that co-authorship of all co-producers on research publications was often indicative of what we call a richer co-production. And it ensured that the different voices involved were retained throughout the project. And more than half of the sample of studies that we looked at did not report that they had adequately implemented key principles of co-production, despite them using the term co-production. And while it's unclear how much of this is due to a lack of the reporting of key details, it's important that you include the key details of your project will be co-produced by the whole team. And you know, this doesn't mean that everyone in your team will be involved in every aspect of your project and what you do. But it's really important for those of us that are assessing the applications to know how you made decisions. Did you make them collectively, or who made those decisions? And I just want to end with saying, you know, there's a section in the Value of Co-Production Rapid Review where we, as a team, detailed how we co-produced the systematic review together, modelling the values and principles of co-production. And we did this, like every project is, within the constraints of the time and the individual skills and interests. And you are going to have to do this too. So to recap, in your applications, outline the different stages of your project and provide us with evidence of how you will co-produce all the stages. And doing this will not only help us assess your application, but it will ensure that your project is an example of rich co-production. So now Rachel will now talk about the pilot projects that were also part of the Value of Co-Production project. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to this video summarising the pilot's learning report from the Co-Production Collective. This video is part of the Value of Co-Production project, a project led by the Co-Production Collective to demonstrate what the impact and value of co-production is and the difference that it can make. I'll be guiding you through the findings. My name is Rachel, but before I do that, I have to tell you a little bit about the background to this report and what our pilot projects were before I get into what we learned from them about the value of co-production. So the Co-Production Collective funded 2 phases of pilot projects from 2018 to 2020. The pilots were with teams working on health research or innovation projects. They all included people with lived or living experience, and funding decisions were made by a mixed panel drawn from the co-production community. So there were 9 pilot projects in total, and they covered a really wide range of projects tackling different issues related to healthcare research and innovation, and also affecting a wide range of people with different lived experiences and coming from different backgrounds. So from working out how co-production could help to improve maternity care for Black and minoritized women, to how we can involve autistic people more effectively in co-production, and much more. So in putting together this summary report from the pilots, what did we set out to learn? We wanted to understand more about the impact of co-production as a way of working together. And we also wanted to learn some more about effective co-production practices, including the challenges that the pilots encountered. So I'll be talking you through both of these themes in this video. The key positive impacts of co-production from the pilot project are listed on this slide. One of the key themes that came out was around power sharing and inclusivity. Taking co-production as an approach really enabled teams to share power more effectively between the people in the room and bring in a more inclusive range of people and then actively include them once they were in the space, working on the project together. Co-production also allowed the project teams to bridge gaps and build relationships, especially between people who don't often get the chance to work together. So between academics and people with lived experience, or between academics and practitioners, and so on. Another key positive impact was raising awareness. The co-production process helped all the participants learn more about the different issues affecting people from different backgrounds. The co-production processes of the project also help facilitate solutions to meet individuals and communities' needs. So just to give one example, from the picture on the right-hand side of the screen is a workshop from the project to help Black and minoritized women's voices be heard more effectively in improving maternity services. This project brought together people from different backgrounds with some expert facilitators and NHS organisations and the voluntary sector. And it resulted in some really specific targeted recommendations around improving continuity of care and also bringing in people from these communities to act as representatives more effectively within further service improvement. So it had a very tangible and kind of specific impact to the people who were involved. Co-production was also really valuable for measuring the impact of the pilots. All of the pilots co-produced their evaluations. And not only did participants feel that this helped them get to a richer understanding of what worked and what didn't, all the projects were able to use this to, where they had strong evaluations in place, then share those findings more widely, and quite a few of them secured further funding as well. So what did we learn from the pilots about the key elements of putting co-production into action? We learned that flexibility is absolutely crucial. Co-production isn't a checklist or a specific process. It's a flexible way of working and it has to be adapted to its context. Inclusion is a really key element of co-production. Without being widely inclusive, a co-production process won't work. Actively thinking about how to achieve power sharing as part of the process is a really key element of co-production as well. Time is a key element of co-production, and it presented both a challenge and an opportunity for the pilots. The pilots were working to short time frames, so that created pressure, and it was difficult for some people to make the time to co-produce. But then that also created a sense of urgency and a real pride in the rapid progress made in a short time. Building relationships and communicating is a really important part of co-production as well. To take just one example from the pilot, our pilot project around involving autistic people in co-production put in some really specific and tailored communication processes for the team that were accessible for everybody on the project, and that allowed all participants, neurotypical and neurodivergent participants, to be authentic in their contributions. And the report that this project produced went far wider and deeper than the project initially planned, and was influential beyond the life of the project as well. Implementing co-production within systems and hierarchies is a really key element of thinking about how to put co-production in place. Again, this also creates challenges and opportunities. Our pilots reported that it was more challenging to put co-production into place in hierarchical systems and places such as academic settings, but that the benefits of doing this were really significant because participants reported that taking part in co-production had changed their way of thinking about their own work and that they would take this forward beyond the life of the pilot. And finally, reflexivity, so taking the time to think back and collectively share what worked and what didn't, was a really key element for all the pilots in successfully putting co-production in action. So that is a really high-level summary of what we found from reflecting on our pilot project. If you'd like to find out more, you can check out the full report of our pilot learnings, or you can go to the Co-Production Collective's website, which is www.coproductioncollective.co.uk. Thank you very much.
We'd like to provide some more information in line with our values around transparency about how we'll be reviewing and scoring against the application criteria. This will be more detailed than my previous presentation in September. First, this is our approach to co-production, not a definition, but what it means to us. So we'll be looking for evidence of equal partnership and equal benefit throughout all of the applications. Just to briefly remind you on the scope, you must demonstrate that you fulfill all 4 of these areas. And just to remind you that the applications will also be reviewed by lay members, so we'd advise to avoid technical language and acronyms as far as possible throughout the application. So these are the 5 core criteria that you will see across the documents, and I ran through this in my previous presentation on the 12th. We'll go through each of these in turn and the questions that align underneath them. Importantly, the appendix table in the application form document is the most helpful document here, and additional information is in the frequently asked questions document too, which is available on the website. So first, our scoring will apply a scale of 1 to 5 as shown here. A score greater than 2 meets most of the criteria, as you'll see by the bold text in the centre of the table. On a general note, we've recommended a maximum word count for each of the areas of the application form. However, we just want to add to use this as a guide. It's to help both applicants and reviewers, but we will allow a little over the guide. So this is something, if you have something critical to say or feel it will make it illegible, we'd rather use a few extra words. So these are the different stages in our review process. I'll talk through the process for each of the stages and what we'll be looking for each question. So the first stage, triage, relates only to questions 1 and 2, and I'll explain what this means. So these are the questions you'll be responding to within this stage. Question 1, we'll be looking at how well does this meet the scope and priorities for the programme, so the 4 areas that we just talked about. Are the aims, objectives clear and well thought out? And are the objectives measurable and realistic within the time frame? And question 2, does the need relate to the beneficiaries? Have the applicants indicated how the aims, objectives and outcomes were or will be co-produced and are a priority for the community or societal needs? And how well has the team demonstrated their commitment to equitable and equality, diversity and inclusion? Different reviewers will score the first 2 questions, and individual scores will feed through to a central sheet. If an application scores more than 2 on both questions, it will pass the triage. If not, we will not review the full proposal. However, if there's a difference between 2 reviewers or appears to be disagreement or anomaly, then the application will still pass the triage and the full application will be reviewed. In stage 2, the application is scored per question for each criteria. Individual scores feed through to a central sheet again, so we can document scores from different reviewers on the same application and still notice any anomalies. So this part of the project explores the project planning elements, and this is what we'll be looking at for these questions. So for question 3, how well does this application meet the scope and specific criteria for the programme? Are the proposed methods appropriate and aligned with the aims and co-production approaches? How well has the team responded to any risks or mitigation strategies? And question 4, how realistic are the aims within the timelines? And is this the case for all parts of the project? And so we'll be looking to comment on any potential risks that we see within the application. Are potential ethical issues or barriers to implementation or timelines identified and addressed by the team? And so the next questions around the principles of co-production, this is what we'll be looking for question 5. So have the applicants embraced the principles of co-production, which we talked about on September the 12th? How much evidence of intention to meet the principles of co-production is there in this response? And how does it align with other parts of the application? How well has the team responded to the principles of inclusion, accessibility, and transparency? And for question 6, we'll be looking at how well the team has explained the contributions of different members in an equitable and balanced manner. So really addressing the balance of power. How does the team match the ambition and objectives for the project? Is the involvement of lived and living experience meaningful and relevant? Is the plan to include additional individuals feasible? Do they have the right knowledge, skills, experience, connection within the team to facilitate these relationships? And the next criteria is commitment to evaluation, sharing, knowledge and learning. And Ruth will cover these questions 7 and 8 in the next presentation. So I will move forward to the next criteria, which is a plan to make a difference from this project. And so this is really around the benefits of the project, the value or the impact, as we often talk about, and how it be communicated or disseminated. So for these questions, how much thought has the team given to the sustainability of relationships post-project? How likely is it that the project will generate further impacts, and have they made plans clear? Have they considered how the learning from their project or this programme may be disseminated and support the wider community? And are there any problems with related projects or funding concerning the data and or dissemination of the project outputs? And finally, turning to the costings, the last question looks at what we expect to see within the costings. So are the costs reasonable? Does the application provide adequate, appropriate payment for community members? Are evaluation costs included for participating in the wider programme? Is there anything missing mentioned in the rest of the application? Are there any costs to support greater accessibility and inclusion? And is there a link or reliance on any other funding source, value in kind? And is this likely to be an issue? In the next stage, stage 3, we specifically decided to have a principle of equity, diversity, and inclusion incorporated throughout the application. So we're going to review this across all of the questions and have a separate score. So this means we'll be looking at the evidence across the whole application. And what we wanted to do to just support that is in terms of how we might look at it across the application and thinking in line with the principles of co-production. Perhaps it was helpful to look at those principles, and some of these factors are embedded within the questions throughout the application. So just wanted to focus in on these principles. So you'll see down the left-hand side, we have the kind of core principles of co-production that we're working to, and just thinking about how you can embed these and consider equitable and inclusive practices as part of this across your application. For example, in terms of the values and benefits for all, who will it make a difference to? And how will you know? What will you do to assess this? In terms of inclusion and transparency, who needs to be included for this to be meaningful? How will you include them? How will you make this accessible, sustain involvement, and how will the group be supported? And then in terms of the power differential and balancing power, what differences may be present? What resources do you have and who controls them? And how can you address those imbalances to ensure that decision making is shared equally? And then in terms of respecting skills and knowledge and experience, what types of knowledge and experience are needed and available, and who's present and who's missing? And how can you ensure everyone feels enabled? So how is the team building capabilities within the project, and how are they likely to be valued? And then finally, just addressing any challenges that could arise in building and maintaining relationships with regard to the principles of equity, equality, diversity, and inclusion. And so the fourth stage is an additional check where any queries for reviewers will be addressed and any concerns raised. And if there's any anomalies on the scoring, they'll be picked up at this point. And there is an opportunity potentially to check queries with applicants. And if we're going to do that, we'll provide a date as soon as we can that we'll be contacting people regarding that stage of the process. And the final stage is to the review panel, which will consider the top 20 scores of all applications. And now I'd like to hand over to Ruth, who's going to talk a little more about evaluation support, what we're looking for, and then Anne will talk about case studies. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ruth. I'm from the Evaluation Exchange, which is working with the Co-Production Collective on the specific aspect of the Measuring Success in Co-Production programme that's got a long-term goal of strengthening approaches to evaluation in co-production. Today you'll be hearing from myself and my colleague Anne, and I'll first give an overview of the support for evaluation in the Measuring Success in Co-Production programme, and then I'll run through some of the relevant application criteria from the application form that you probably want to know a bit more about. And then I'll hand over to Anne, who will be looking a bit closer at what we think evaluation is, and she'll also provide some case studies that we thought might be useful to bring some of those examples to life. So to give an overview of the support that we're hoping to provide to the Measuring Success in Co-Production programme, we aim as the Evaluation Exchange to support the selected projects to embed evaluation in their work in a way that's appropriate to their needs and the project context. So if you're successful and you're selected to be part of the programme, I want to emphasise that we won't be evaluating your projects, but supporting you to do what you want to do to reflect and learn in a way that's appropriate for you and your project. And from that experience, we aim to capture learning from your experience of trying out those different evaluation approaches, and we'll be drawing on that to help develop guidance to support future co-produced projects to evaluate their work. What will the support that we provide look like? Well, we hope to provide some training, or what are being called deepening practice sessions, that are likely to support projects with evaluation planning, exploring different evaluation methods and ways of sharing findings, and also adapting in response to what you're learning as you put those different methods into practice. And alongside that, we hope to provide some ad hoc coaching and guidance to specific teams if needed, and we'll also be running some sharing and learning sessions to capture your experience. So what does this look like in practice? Now, here is a diagram of different elements of the Measuring Success in Co-Production programme. Now, this is a diagram that I shared in our September session and went into in a bit more depth. So I'd really encourage you to watch that video to hear a bit more about it. But for the purposes today, we're focusing on that middle arrow, which is around the support the Evaluation Exchange is offering in terms of embedding evaluation in your project. And what I particularly want you to be mindful of is the fact that we'd expect all projects to come together at different points over the programme for those deepening practice sessions around evaluation. So along that arrow there, you'll see that in January there's the first session, and we're likely to have that online. The second session in February, again online, and then a third session in April, which we're exploring if it could be in person, and then again June online. And we'll also be having those sharing and learning sessions that I've mentioned, and they're represented by the grey circles in April and September, with the aim of capturing your experience and your thoughts on the evaluation approaches you're co-developing together within your teams, to then help inform the guidance that we hope to produce to support evaluation in co-production in the future. So in terms of this aspect of the programme, what we're looking for is a commitment to participating in those deepening practice and sharing and learning sessions. But more broadly, we're looking for individuals and projects who want to be involved in the co-production of learning and reflection in their projects, and recognising and valuing that everyone has a contribution to make, and also a commitment to sharing learning from your experience to inform future guidance that's supporting evaluation in co-production. And again, I talked about these in a bit more detail in our September session, so do re-watch that video if you want to know a bit more. So more specifically, turning now to the application criteria and the form, you'll notice that questions 7 and 8 are focused on your commitment to evaluation in your project team. So we'll look at each of those questions in turn, and also we'll look at question 10, which is about the budget, which also includes a little bit about evaluation. So I wanted to mention that as well. Question 7. Now that's asking, what aspects of your project do you plan to evaluate, and how would you like to do this, and how might this benefit others? So what we're looking for in your application form is your interest and your readiness to co-produce evaluation. And these bullet points under the question are summarising the bullet points on the application form on page 13 in the right-hand column, where it describes what we are looking for. And so specifically, what we want to see is a commitment to evaluation or capturing and sharing learning as a result of being part of this programme and from co-producing your project and the evaluation. Additionally, you'll notice that we say we're looking for plans with realistic plans for evaluation. So when we say we're looking for realistic plans, we're looking for plans that aren't too ambitious or grand for an 6 to 8 month project, especially if you're starting something new and working with people that you might not have met before. We're looking for something that is a collaboration between the people involved, and that it's appropriate to the circumstances you're working in and the people that you're working with, and also that it's proportionate to the size of your project and what's needed. And later on, Anne will explain a bit about what we mean by when we say we want things to be appropriate or proportionate. I should say here that we recognise that plans might change and you might not have all the answers at this stage, and that's absolutely fine, and it might be something that you want to mention, especially because you'll be co-producing your approaches as you go. And of course, finally, it's important that we know that you factored in the time of everyone to contribute to this aspect of your project. So question 8 in the application form, that's asking, how do you hope this programme will support you as a team or develop your capacity to capture and share your learning? So again here, underneath the question, I've pulled out the bullet point that's on page 13 in the right-hand column of the application form that describes what we're looking for. And to explain this bullet point a bit more, it means we are looking for a real commitment to learning and probably an awareness of potential strengths or weaknesses or in your team, or what your team's experience or knowledge brings and where you lack confidence, say, and may need some support. And moving on then to question 10, which is about the budget. Some aspects of this will have been described by Vanessa earlier, but specifically relating to evaluation, we don't want you to forget to add the cost of people's time for attending those online deepening practice and sharing sessions if needed. And we're exploring, as I mentioned earlier, whether the April date might be in person. You don't need to include travel and accommodation costs in your total budget, because if it is in person, we'd hope to cover this centrally. But actually what would be useful for us is if you can provide any information about potential costs for in-person activities that would help with our budgeting. And please take a look at our FAQs about this. And of course, on that final line, don't forget to include the costs of the evaluation activities you might do and the dissemination of any findings during the project timeframe. An estimated absolute minimum of those costs would be probably at least 5% of your total budget, and possibly more given the heavy emphasis of learning in this particular programme. So that's the final reference that I wanted to make to the application form. So I want to say thank you, and that's everything from me at this stage. Do find us in one of the rooms in Remo, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. And before then, I'll hand over to Anne.
Hello everyone, my name is Anne Crisp. I'm the Director of Compost London and part of the delivery team for the Evaluation Exchange. And I'm going to explain to you briefly how we see evaluation and show you a few case studies of the evaluation challenges we've been involved in. So what do we mean by evaluation? It can mean different things to different people. And to some of you, it may mean nothing at all, and that's okay. We believe as a human being, you will have the skills and the mindset to do it, because essentially evaluation is about reflecting, which helps you learn, which helps you change things for the better, adjusting things that aren't working well and keep doing things that are working well. There are many different approaches to learning and reflecting, and many different things to learn and reflect about. Evaluations need to fit your specific circumstances and requirements. Different people will have different levels of confidence, maybe even fear around evaluation, but everyone's knowledge and experience is of value. We think there are three very simple principles that are useful to bear in mind in terms of evaluation. Rather than promote a specific approach, we bring together people with different knowledge and experience to co-produce a solution that works for them. And in this case, it's the project team you'll be in, developing your own evaluation approaches relevant to your own project. So we're about embedding useful and practical approaches to reflecting and learning that work for people using them in the long term. And we sought evaluation that is collaborative first, that involves a range of people and different perspectives, and that's worked out together. That's appropriate. There is no one size fits all to evaluation. Every activity is different. And evaluation requirements will vary with each project and with the purpose of each evaluation. And finally, that is proportionate in relation to the specific activities you're evaluating. It has to be realistic and doable. I'm going to share 3 case studies. These are all community organisations that took part in one of our evaluation exchange programmes. And here we match teams of students and researchers with organisations on specific evaluation challenges. It will give you an idea of the kind of things we can help you to work out. And I'm going to show how the 3 principles apply to each case study. So the first is Iroko, an African theatre company, and their challenge was to create tools to measure reactions to activities to use in a project for people with dementia. So the tools we helped them to create needed to be easy to use, accessible and fun. And they came up with what they called the Iroko Tree of Discovery. Different coloured leaves represented different levels of satisfaction or enjoyment, and people picked them up and hung them on the tree. There was no writing involved. It was easy to explain and to understand, and it fitted the organisation because Iroko is a name for a West African tree. This was collaborative because the team of researchers worked with Iroko staff to understand what they wanted to capture and what would work. It was appropriate because it fulfilled the purpose of their evaluation, which was quite simple. It connected with the nature and even name of their organisation, and it found a method that worked for their particular users. And it was proportionate because it was quick, it was simple, and it was doable for people with dementia. Second case study, the Magpie Project, they were very new when they joined the programme, a matter of months old. They support families with young children under 5s in temporary or insecure accommodation. And they wanted to measure the impact of their project on mums' well-being. And these mums were very vulnerable, so this needed to happen sensitively. And the team worked with Magpie to create a simple visual tool to measure well-being. And the way they did that was by speaking to the mums first about what to ask and how. And they did that by sitting on the floor with them while they were playing with their babies. This evaluation was collaborative because it was designed with the mums themselves. It was appropriate because the mums made sure it was. They had chose the focus and the method. And it was proportionate because it was a quick, accessible way to capture how mums were feeling over time. The final case study happens to be the UK's first city farm, Kentish Town City Farm in Camden. They wanted to find out which areas of their farm people enjoyed most and least. And they wanted this evaluation activity to be engaging and accessible to everyone, and especially to young children. And the team there created a map of the farm that was placed at the exit, and using different coloured stickers, visitors fed back on which area they enjoyed most and least. The map was collaborative because it involved children, researchers, farm staff and a designer. It was appropriate for even very young children and their families. And it was proportionate because it gave very quick feedback opportunity as people left after a visit. So hopefully this has given you an idea about how we see evaluation, the kind of things we can help you do, the kind of support we can provide through this programme, and also how evaluation can be easy and even fun. So please come and find us in the evaluation breakout room and have a conversation and ask your questions. Thank you.
Hello everyone. My name is Lisa Richardson and I am a co-producer with the Measuring Success in Co-Production Learning by Doing project. I'm just going to take a couple of moments to talk about how we are evaluating ourselves as part of the project. So really our aim in evaluating ourselves is to understand and capture our learning, experiences, and the impact of working together whilst following the principles of the co-production collective. We really want to be able to add to the knowledge base around the conditions necessary for co-production and our experiences of evaluation in co-production. We're using three approaches in our evaluation. We're using a Padlet, which is an online shared space that is to reflect on the principles of co-production and to document the impact of co-production on all of the co-producers. We're using what we find through the Padlet space to generate group discussions, to consider what's working well and what we need to work on, so that we can enter a continuous cycle of learning. We're also using an Excel spreadsheet to help us document our key decisions through the process, as well as who was involved in making those decisions. Finally, we're engaging in storytelling. We'll be writing blogs, and we are working with People's Voice Media on community reporting. You'll hear from Isaac a little bit more about that in just a moment. But before we do that, I just wanted to share with you a little taste of our Padlet space. So you can see here at the top, we've got various different zones that offer people a quick guide to the space, a reminder of our core values, our ways of working, so that we make sure we apply those principles within the online space. We've got some Padlet tips to help people think through what they might want to post about and how to use the different functions in the Padlet. We've also provided some more resources to help people think about what they bring to the work. This might just be through offering people some guidance around personal reflexivity. So, we're really encouraging people to think broadly about reflection and reflexivity throughout the work that we do. There's an area on the Padlet for each of the principles of co-production. And here you can see I've shared principle 1, which is about building and maintaining relationships. So in this space on the Padlet, people can engage and share what's keeping them going, what's helping us work together, what's motivating. They can also share what obstacles we've faced or that we need to overcome. There's space to share ideas about keeping us moving forward to make sure we're working well and working within the lines of the principles of co-production that we've all agreed to. So that gives you a sense of the Padlet space, and we're happy to talk more to people about that during the session if you'd like to find out more. I'll now hand over to Isaac, who's going to talk about the community reporting. Thank you.
Community reporting is a digital storytelling approach. This enables people and communities to participate in research, policy making, service development and co-production, of course. There are 3 distinct stages of community reporting. Story gathering, providing a space and a platform for voice where people can share their lived experiences of particular topics. Story curation, where we invite those very people back in to help us understand what common themes and messages are coming out of these stories and how we may organise those stories. Story mobilisation, how we take the learning and put this learning into action. This may mean targeting our learning into particular places. We have adapted this approach even within this project. We're using this to support our own monitoring and evaluation within the Measuring Success team. Community reporting is a very good tool to enable us to monitor and evaluate our progress around co-production and research.
Thank you, Isaac. So that brings us to the end of the presentation, and we hope these will be really helpful to you.